Actually, even before YC, our first big problem was we didn't know how to talk to investors. So we thought, well, we have a tool. Let's just simulate them. So we simulated around 1,000 VC investors, and we used that tool to optimize and edit our own YC application and our own pitch.
What if you could simulate how your market will react before you launch? Well, James He is building exactly that. He's the founder of Artificial Societies, of course, YC-backed startup making social simulation tools used by 11x and over 3,000 startups. And this isn't sci-fi. They're not hoping to build this. It is working today. So James went from rural China to Cambridge. He turned down a CS PhD and ran the largest ever study on an LLM society before launching the company. So James, I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
All right, let's dive in. So tell us in your own words what Artificial Societies does exactly and why you wanted to build this.
Yeah, sure. So artificial societies is essentially a large group of AI personas that simulate a large group of humans and how they interact and influence each other. So a lot of our users use us to test how their messages would land with a group of target customers, with a group of, say, investors. And recently, some people have asked us if we can simulate the Roman Senate and put Fox News through it to see how they
Wow.
would react. So that would be fun, perhaps less commercially useful, but it will be very interesting to see.
That's really awesome. And I remember, so you went through YC in winter 25, so not so long ago. And I
Yes.
remember you launched a tool for your batchmates of, okay, let's simulate a bunch of investors and you can go and pitch to them before demo day to train and see their reactions to actually get better pitches. And that's how you built your pitch as well, correct?
Yeah, so actually, even before YC, our first big problem was we didn't know how to talk to investors. So we thought, well, we have a tool. Let's just simulate them. So we simulated around 1,000 VC investors, and we used that tool to optimize and edit our own YC application and our own pitch. And I guess it worked.
Wow, you made it to YC by simulating the investment. That's so cool. Okay, I want to dive into the tech in a minute, how you simulate so many investors or people, but before that, take me back. So you studied, human behavior and groups of people. How did you go from those studies to actually starting artificial societies?
Yeah, so when I was back in Cambridge, my interest has always been in how do I use computers to understand human behavior. I've always been sort of inspired by the Walter Isaacson books about how innovation comes from integrating humanity and technology. So a lot of my interest is in how do we join those together. My early research were on can we use computers to predict how messages would spread on human social media.
Wow.
So when I saw what LLMs could do when they first came out, I was thinking, okay, what if we have a lot of GPT-3 driven um, chatbots to play individual humans? Then this is the first time in history where you can begin to model how a group of human might interact with each other, might influence each other, any kind of culture that might form. And this is the first time where you can actually see how a huge group of people will respond to something before you actually take the bet in the real world. So I thought, well, this idea of an artificial societies is it's going to be an inevitable technology. The question is not who's going to it's not the question is not whether it's doable. The question is who's going to build it. And I have been spending a lot of time between humanity and technology, so I decided to throw my hat into the ring and build a product out of it.
That's really inspiring. I mean, once again, it goes to show that Y Combinator attracts and selects visionary founders just changing the world, reshaping the world. It is very interesting as well because it might seem obvious now to some people, but of course, when you started working on it months and years ago, you were one of the very first ones, and of course, you going through YC gives a lot of publicity to the idea in itself, to the concept.
Oh yeah.
But really, just YC again backing visionary founders, and that's why I really wanted to have you on the show because it is just so
Thank you.
incredibly unique. So let's dive a little bit into the technicality of it. We don't need to get into all the details. And of course, I'm sure you have a lot of trade secrets as well. But how do you simulate thousands of people and accurately? Because you want their opinion to be hopefully the right one. I'm guessing there's the law of numbers, of big numbers in there. But how can you make that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the key part here is actually that you can't take individuals as separate beings. We are social animals. Our opinion gets influenced by each other a lot. One of the biggest influencing factor on human behavior that I learned back in Cambridge was social influence. Crowd and social norm and culture changes our opinion a lot. So if we are modeling human society with a lot of AIs, then it doesn't make sense to have a group of AIs just, simulating some surveys, just treat them as isolated individuals. Humans are not isolated individuals suspended in vacuum. We are social animals. So the right way to approach it is to see if you can model how people influence each other. Who are they influenced
Uh-huh.
by? And how are their society influencing each other? And that's how we've been approaching it. We create essentially a we essentially create thousands of AI chatbots and let them influence each other. And we have another system that guides this influencing process. Imagine it's almost like thinking in your head, if I said this, this friend of mine would react this way, and that mutual friend will react that way because this friend react this way, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Imagine this with hundreds or thousands of people. That's essentially what we are doing in a nutshell.
Wow, that's so cool. I love it. It's a very new way of thinking about it. I never thought about it this way, but it reminds me of why some things go viral. There's no way to predict anything going viral, and I don't think you're there yet. But many times you hear about the story of a song going viral or a tweet going viral, and there's almost always a tipping point where at the beginning it's just the internet crowd, but then at some point you have one or two amplifier that suddenly a journalist with 1 million followers on Twitter tweets the song, retweets your tweet, blah blah blah. There's always sort of this tipping point, and then it explodes and really goes viral because this person influenced everyone else. And so this is sort of
Ah,
mimicking this, I guess.
yeah, well, actually, when we look at the science of information spread, and I do pardon the nerdiness here, I did write some papers on this area. The tipping point that you talk about is usually actually not caused by
Ah.
one key individual sharing it. The one key individual sharing something is usually the result of the tipping point
Okay.
rather than the cause of it. The cause is actually that your message has resonated with a certain critical mass of people who are connected with each other in the right way. Think of it this way: you wouldn't start drinking if only 10% of your friends drink, 90% of them don't drink. But if you only have four friends and three of them are drinking, then chances are you are going to start drinking as well. That's how social influence work. So if you want to create a big social, big spread of information or a big social movement, it's actually more it's actually better to target those who have less connections so that you have more proportion of their friend group adopting the behavior. But that's a very nerdy topic. I'm sure we
No,
can
that's
discuss
awesome.
it further. This is part of what we simulate in our
That's really cool.
system.
Thanks for the education. I'm glad I was wrong because now I learned something much more interesting. Thank you very much for that. Okay. Um, so right now, or I should say during YC, because hopeful probably right now you've evolved into some other stuff. But I remember during YC you could so simulate a pitch to investors, but also you had this very useful feature, especially for me who's publishing daily on LinkedIn. If listeners don't follow me on LinkedIn, come follow me on LinkedIn. Where you could try a message before posting to LinkedIn. You could simulate your network and see how your post is going to perform. Uh, I want to ask you about this specifically, how you build it, but also what else have you built and what else can we use it for? Because I know there's almost infinite possible use cases.
Yeah. So thank you for being one of the first people to try out artificial societies. Like you are one of the first humans on Earth who had his personal social simulation engine before anyone else did.
Wow.
So that's very cool.
Thank you.
And we've been so during YC and after for the few months, we've been building a lot of these demo products, such as being able to simulate how your pitch lands with a group of investors. You can also see how they talk to each other, like how real investors do. It's really fun. And we have been able to simulate your LinkedIn. You just put in your LinkedIn URL, and we go to find out what are the publicly available information about who's engaged with you on LinkedIn before. And we simulate that, simulate how they influence each other, simulate whether there will be group cascade effects and the stuff that we were talking about just now. And later, we also helped a lot of the businesses who's been reaching out to us to simulate their target customers. So, say someone is expanding to a new market. How do I change my product proposition to this new market while not anger my existing customer group? So, we created simulations of their existing customer group and their target customer group to see how do we find that balance of messaging. And now we've actually wrapped all of those functionalities into one product simply called Artificial Societies. And you can use it to do all of the above. You can use it to simply describe, okay, I want to simulate this group of people. I want to simulate investors who make early stage investment decisions in AI. And then our platform will go and retrieve relevant AI personas from our database of 1 million and more profiles based on real people to construct that society. Then you can simulate, how should I write a cold email to these investors? How should I write a pitch deck to these investors? How should I, well, in the other scenario, if I describe my target customers, how should I do my product proposition? We saw some of our users actually creating several potential target customer groups and then just test the same proposition across all these different groups. And we were like, why are you simulating so many times? And turns out they're trying to find PMF. They're testing different markets to see which one will respond to their proposition the best. So maybe they haven't got product market fit, but they might have promise market fit. So that was a fun little thing that we didn't really expect to see from our usage data.
It's very interesting. Instead of changing the product, they're trying to change the audience. It's the other way to find product market fit that maybe did not exist before. Is you don't build
Yeah.
something else, you keep what you have, but you find the right audience. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Um, Before we move on, I have a note here from my team because I almost always forget to ask our listeners to subscribe. If you're not yet subscribed on YouTube, you can hit the notification bell. If you're on your favorite podcast platform, please leave us a 5-star review. That really helps. Um, I want to ask you again. You have to please keep your secrets, but and not be too technical if you don't want to. But how do you know
Mm.
which parts to simulate? Because okay, I want to find PMF. I want to simulate my customers, and I out of the millions, you're going to simulate maybe 1,000 or a few thousand people, but maybe what really is important is price sensitivity, or maybe what is important is where they live. But like we don't necessarily know if it's in the prompt. You can know that, but sometimes it's not in the prompt. And so, how can you
Mm.
infer what to simulate? Because obviously, the question everyone's asking is, how do we know those predictions are correct, are good?
Yeah.
It turns out they
Yeah.
are, but so how do you make the magic happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we started from looking at social media for that exact reason, because on social media it's really easy to find whether our predictions are correct or not. So when we predict that one post is going to land better than another post, it takes around 48 hours for us to be proven right or wrong, which means we get to be really honest
Yeah.
about the performance of our technology. While as, like when it comes to say product proposition, it's gonna be really hard because execution matters, who you are as a founder matters. So there is a lot more statistical noise that we call. But on social media, we get to do that kind of pairwise comparison and see if we can pick the winner for a lot of times. So in our own back testing eval, we found that by looking at around 500 pairs of posts written by the same author towards the same audience, so everything else is controlled, we are able to correctly identify the winner at 83% of the time,
Wow.
which is great.
Yeah.
And how did we get there when we don't know all of the details of that person? Well, we know how people influence each other. And we know how an idea was spread in a group. That's why we are called artificial societies, not artificial individual. So the analogy here, pardon the nerdy analogy again, the analogy here is if you want to model a glass of water, trying to model every single water molecule, you're going to see something called Brownian motion. It's going to be complete randomness. But if you look at water as a whole, you know when it's going to boil, you know when it's going to freeze. This is the same as a society. We will know when a society is going to spread our information a lot or not, and without needing to be super accurate on every singular individual. But of course, it helps. So we also gather a lot of behavioral data about each individual based on their publicly available information. And we have a system that takes those behavioral traces and turn them into AI personas that can then inform our overall modeling without going into too much technical details
Oh,
here.
that's awesome. I love that. The water analogy is really cool. Really cool. You don't need to know about every single molecule. You still know how water behaves. Okay, I'm completely changing topics. Before we go into the launching of the product and the distribution and the growth, I want to take a short step back and just talk about your life. So you're born in China, you study in the UK, now you're going through YC in San Francisco. So just tell us a little bit of the story there. How did what was the goal of all of this? And I'm getting somewhere, which but I can tell you after. We can start with sort of
Sounds
your life
good.
story.
No
Yeah,
worries. Yeah. So I was born in Sichuan, China, and I left home when I was 14 to go to New Zealand for school. Um, and then I went to Cambridge to study behavioral science. Like my family, we none of us have ever been to university. So when I first proposed that I would apply to Cambridge, my parents' first reaction was, "You might be too arrogant, James. Maybe we have encouraged you too much." Asian parents. It's simply because it's just so outside of our imagination to apply to university, let alone one of the best universities in the world. And now, if you talk to YC founders, most of them will tell you you shouldn't apply to university, just apply to YC.
that's true. That's true.
I
Yeah.
I would tend to
Yeah.
agree, honestly. But don't do B2B SaaS. Like if you're 18 and building in B2B
Yeah.
SaaS, do you even know what SaaS means? Anyways,
Brutal.
yeah. But I went to Cambridge, and my whole life I've been just I try to really examine my choices and examine my life. An unexamined life is not worth living. And I always find myself thinking about what am I trying to optimize for, or what do I care the most about in life? And after a few years, after being trapped in Cambridge for a year due to COVID, I realized that I want to live an interesting life. That's the goal of that's perhaps the optimization function that I
Yeah.
want to maximize. And to me, that means making a unique and irreplaceable contribution to this world. And it has to be unique to me, and it has to be a contribution to the world.
Yeah.
That's how I feel happy. So that's why I've been always researching at the intersection between humanity and technology. That's why instead of just following the path of doing a master's degree and a PhD, I was like, let me go into the startup world. And that's why I'm building artificial societies, because when ChatGPT first came out, I was like, well, seems like no one else is doing something like this. Let me do it, and hopefully the world gets a interesting little experiment.
That's awesome. Brilliant. And are you building this from the UK, or are you moving your operations in SF? I'm asking because YC is very vocal about wanting founders to relocalize in SF. Actually, your odds or chances of unicorn are 2 to 3 times greater if you're in SF. So, what did you decide there?
We actually decided to stay in the UK. Now, one, because we are statisticians and social scientists by training. So when we see YC stats, we looked a little bit under the hood and did our own analysis. And it seems like London and SF doesn't have a meaningful difference when it comes to startup success. YC's stats are, let's just say that YC has its own motivations. And we decided that, for our specific team, we want to maximize our unfair advantage in whichever environment we are in. We are very lucky that based on the capital that we've managed to raise, we are able to be rather competitive in hiring within London. We don't have that advantage in the US. We have advantage of the connection to Oxford and Cambridge over here. We don't have that advantage in the
Yeah,
US.
that's true.
So it's really based on that and based on the team's prior connection within the city that we decided to stay in London rather than relocating to SF.
All right. Don't listen, Gary. Don't listen. You're fine. People are still gonna come to SF, Gary. I promise. He would not be happy. Okay, moving on.
He
Uh,
would not be happy.
he would not be happy. So you have more than 3,000 startups using artificial societies today. Tell me about the go-to-market. The was it viral? Because the LinkedIn prediction tool, I think, was quite viral. It worked. Everyone, me included, was like, "Oh, that's so cool! I need to try that." How did you? What was
Thank
your
you.
the GTM, the spreading of
Hmm.
this tool at the beginning?
Actually, we now have 15,000, 15,000, yes,
Wow,
15,000 accounts. So we are quite
impressive.
happy about that. And of course, thanks to our own product that has been helping us to get our message right before we take the bet in the real world. So our whole strategy has been to put a product out there that people can use. On the one hand, it helps us improve our own product and make it better. On the other hand, it also helps to create a community of people talking about artificial societies, sharing tips and tricks. We very much modeled ourselves upon how OpenAI does things. When they put out ChatGPT, it's a very horizontal technology.
Yeah,
But the wonderful thing is that when you take the leap of faith and put a horizontal product out there, then what you get is people showing you things that you didn't expect.
yeah,
You get to learn from your users on how to build your product, and your users are going to tell each other how to use your product. That adoption and that usage driven by the community is the flywheel that I think a lot of perhaps stealth founders are missing
yeah.
right now. And that's why we've always done a sort of product led motion. And we are lucky that our product helps us with our distribution. So there is that internal flywheel there. And I guess you can argue that, well, if it works, and then using your own product to sell your own product should work. And I guess it's working right now. So that's fun.
That's exactly where I wanted to go with this. Is tell me ways that and that would be a question that if I ever have Sam Altman on the podcast, Sam, you're invited. I would ask him the same question. Uh, but the question to you is, how are you using your own tool internally, but that you're
Mm,
not advertising? Like, tell me the secret. Tell me what you're not usually
okay.
saying on how. Of course, you said we're trying our messaging, but tell me the real stuff.
Yeah, well, so if you're creative enough, then a message doesn't have to be just a LinkedIn post. It doesn't have to be your website copy or your email to investors. It can also be your user journey. So once we actually described our onboarding user journey, just saying things like just describing to the platform things like um, this person is a marketing manager. They recently discovered this new tool called Artificial Societies on their phone, and they signed up to Artificial Societies. They filled in the onboarding form saying this value and that value, and then they hit continue, and here is the following screen that they saw. And we describe the following screen. And then we've been using that method to
Wow.
test what sort of screens we should put at different parts of our onboarding journey and what sort of communication do we optimize on. And in fact, just over the last 2 weeks since we released the new product, we've been able to increase our initial trial uptake rate by over twice, over double the
Wow.
initial take up rate
Huge.
by just doing a lot of these optimization using our own product. You know, like this was impossible in the old days where you need to set up a real A/B test and wait for months for one result to happen and then come back, debate a bit, and then do another one. We could simulate all of these things in like, you know, a few hours, trying out different options, and then we ship the version that has the highest chance of success to test in the real world. Don't get me wrong, we are still testing in the real world. We are behavioral scientists by training. We do a lot of A B tests on our product, but we want to make sure that every experiment counts by pre experimenting a lot of options and finding out what are the options that could have the best chance at improving our conversion rate, for example. So that's one way of using our own product that we've been doing internally that we haven't seen a lot of people doing. So we're quite proud to be discovering new powers of our own product still. So that's
That's
quite fun.
so cool. No, congrats. Thank you for the honest answer. I There's a follow up question that I had listening to you is, there was A/B testing for 20 years. It exists on the web, but now the newest tools is A, B, C, D, E, F, G testing. You can test 10 different things, but you're not the one creating the tests. AI is creating the tests for you. So you just say, test this page. You don't have to come up with your own hypothesis. And the AI is going to say, well, what if instead of saying sign up, I said register or try for free? And the AI is just going to figure it out itself. I'm actually an investor in a few YC companies doing exactly that. And it's amazing
Nice.
for customers. And so that was my question to you is, you said you're testing different hypotheses and see how your society would react. Is the next step that the society is actually giving you some ideas and some feedback and saying, hey, I'm coming on this page. It's not great, but I would love if I had seen this and this and that. And it becomes sort of a recommendation engine?
Yeah, I mean, our system currently conducts automatic A/B tests and generates some other suggestions alongside it. And that's actually how we did our own onboarding flow optimization is by
Perfect.
chatting with the system and coming up with some other variations. Because one wonderful thing about simulations is that you can break the laws of physics. You don't have to just do an A/B test. You can do an A to Z test. Um, so you can do as many options as you want.
Yeah.
So it means that it's a great tool for experimenting the options that you otherwise wouldn't have time to explore. You know, it means that now, every time we test on artificial societies, it's exploring 10 extra versions for us automatically.
Wow.
Then it saves a lot of time and increases our chance of finding that right one before going out in the real world.
That's so cool. Okay. I love it. All right.
Thanks.
Let's move on to your thoughts on the market a little bit more generally. So what do you think is, and I'm guessing, I'm guessing you have lots of things to say about this topic. What do you think is broken about market research today?
Yeah, so my co-founder Patrick has been a applied behavioral scientist helping enterprises do market research for the last few years. And he he knows the pain. He has experienced the pain much more than I have. The one thing I can say is like how we met was actually quite interesting. I showed him a prototype of artificial society. This is a year ago now, very janky prototype, and he was like, he had been running this manual A/B test for 2 months. It was expensive. It costed them more than $20,000 to just run this one messaging test about how
Wow.
do we communicate this price change to customers. One test. And once you do that report, it just sits there. It sits on a shelf and it just goes into, I don't know, maybe the board can now say that we have conducted enough research around this area. It doesn't actually have an impact in the real world, and it's expensive, it's slow, it's imperfect, because you are, when you are doing survey research, when you're doing those kind of trials, you are making so much assumptions. You are making assumptions that people's opinion are going to be the same as their behavior. You are making assumptions that people are independent from each other. There's just so much difficulty with those traditional methods, and in the end you get a report that sits there that goes out of date in a year, that doesn't get implemented. So when I showed the prototype to Patrick, I just saw his eyes open. He was like, "Whoa, this is the future." I thought, "Okay, yes, I got a B2B deal." Um, and then later that day, he sent me a long text saying that he's ready to quit his job to join me in building
Wow.
this. And I was like, "Damn, just give me a deal first before you quit your
Yeah.
job, please." But no, so that's so like we've very much felt the pain that a lot of our customers have been facing with traditional methods. Every time they reach out to us, they're like, "Wow, what you guys are building is like a dream come
Yeah.
true." If it means that all of our static market research data that we are currently doing can be turned to live in a simulation, we can ask it follow-up questions. We can run an experiment in 30 seconds rather than 3 months. That means that we are able to test so many more options. That means that we are able to actually bring these data to life and have intelligence that we can use rather than just a tick box exercise that we report to someone else. And because of that, we are quite excited to be able to help out with those
That's
things.
really cool. Yeah, I mean, this market, it's old and clunky, and you come with, yeah, you're I don't know, 20, 30 years ahead technologically. Like, it must be really mind-blowing for them because the way,
It's
yeah.
fun. One thing to add here is that we are very much not aiming to replace, real human research. And in fact, we do real human research ourselves. We do real A/B tests on our own product. We insist on real user interviews with our own customers. What we are trying to do is to expand what's possible with market research rather than just replacing it. I think you hear a lot of narratives around that, oh, just tap into a budget and displace that budget
Mm,
with AI
yeah.
applications. We think there is a much bigger opportunity, both commercially and also in terms of just being a good contributor to the world, to help expand what's possible. You wouldn't run a focus group on a LinkedIn post in the
Yeah.
past. That would just be way too expensive, right? But now you can
Yeah.
in 30 seconds, which is crazy.
It's very
And
interesting,
that's
this
the
idea
part.
that, and so many people are getting to it now, that it's not only replacing, killing jobs, it's actually adding new layers in the economy, new things possible that you just wouldn't do before. And that's the perfect example. You would never run a survey or a focus group on a LinkedIn post, but now you can just go further with AI.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Love it. What are most AI founders? And of course, when I say most AI founders, we should also hear most YC founders because it's often the same thing. So, what are most AI founders still getting wrong about human behavior?
That is a very good question. One thing that we've learned is that um, you shouldn't let your product, you shouldn't allow your customers to make the product worse for themselves when you're designing your product. I think a lot of founders tend to try to pack as much
Mm,
functionality into the product as
yeah.
possible, but then forgetting that if you are packing functionality in a product that dilutes a certain
Mm,
workflow,
yeah.
that potentially allows the customer to have a worse product experience, then you should remove that
Mm,
functionality. But then, of course, it's really hard because, especially if you are building a more horizontal product like ours, how do you create a horizontal product that allows multiple workflows but not pack too much functionality there that allows people to get lost? We are still
yeah.
figuring this
That's
out,
tough.
but it is just one thing that is very top of mind for us. And because we are behavioral scientists, we try to do so much experiments on it to try to figure it out.
It is a recurring theme here on this podcast. It's a conversation I've had with so many founders, and it's not easy. I don't think there's a definitive answer, but it comes down to how do you listen to your customers and how do you not listen to your customers? And of course, if you never listen and don't do anything, that's bad. But if you listen too much, I think it's Henry Ford who said customers can choose any color car they want as long as it's black. And so you just had one black car and it worked. And customers, of course, they want a
Yeah.
yellow and a blue car, but it's not always a good thing to listen to them. So I don't know if we ever get the sort of definitive or final answer on this. It is very, very difficult. And yes, you have to answer your customers' needs, but make your product simple and not too clunky. And
I think, yeah, I mean, I guess we have two operating principles here. I mean, one very simple one is to just build empathy with your customer. You need to be able to feel their pain. And because that pain, if you are able to fine tune yourself to feel the same pain that your customers feel, then when you are building the product, that guides you, that pain guides you. I guess that's point one. That's why we listen to customers. That's why we insist on doing actual real customer interviews rather than just chatting with a simulated customer. We can't just simulate our customers, but we do still speak to our real
yeah,
customers because we want to build that human empathy, because we want to feel their pain so that that pain guides our product thinking. And another thing that we operate on, this it might sound counterintuitive, it might sound completely opposite to each other, but we really remember our mission and vision. We really remember that we want to leave our dent in the universe, and it needs to be our own. It needs to be a unique and irreplaceable contribution. So that's very much something else that we think about because we're like, oh, okay, we can build, for example, for us, we can build a lot of integration feature to make it super, super good in terms of LinkedIn publishing. But is that a product that we want to build? Is that the mark we want to leave in this world? Then we need to think about that and make a good choice, make a design
sure.
choice. That choice, there might not be right or wrong there. There's only whether you have been honest with yourself or not.
Interesting.
Because you can try to build a business and make some money, but it's your choice whether it's your life's work or whether it's just a business.
Amazing words to live by. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Um, I wanted to ask you earlier. I wanted to ask you how can the audience use this, but we're going to skip this because you've given plenty of examples, and also it's up to each listener to be creative enough to say, okay, this is. But messaging in general, so it could be used for almost anything. But I also wrote the opposite question: are there some things, some verticals, some products, some things where it really doesn't work yet, or maybe never will?
That's a really good question. Right now, most of our users have been making the most of us by simulating professionals because we have a lot of information that's publicly available about how professionals behave. And it's funny because these are the people who are the hardest to survey with traditional methods. Things like investors, doctors, bankers, consultants. these people don't usually pick up the phone to answer a traditional interview because they are too busy. But there's a lot of information about them available online. They put a lot of information out there. They write a lot. They use the
Hmm.
internet, and because of that, we are able to create good accuracy simulation of them. So a lot of our customers, for example, one of our customers sells to CFOs. So we created a simulation of 500 CFOs for them. That would be so expensive to survey
Yeah.
traditionally. I don't even want to think about it. That's a disgusting amount of money if you were using a
Yeah, that's true.
traditional method. So that's been sort of a like to turn on the other hand, if you are simulating, I don't know, like British farmers, that would be harder because simply because there's just less information available, and I think in those cases, like it would be better to use a more traditional method and actually going to discover those people yourself. And we are very keen to make sure that we don't misrepresent a group that we don't know enough of. So that's why we focus more on social media and on people online, because we're confident in being able to produce a good service for our customers there. And now that's on the groups of people side. On the use cases side and the types of things that you want to simulate, that side of things, we've been finding that there is still a lot of human idiosyncrasies, human characteristics. Things like, how does something taste? What is the emotional, what is the instinctive visual impact of a cover image? Those feelings, or like, if you are looking at if you are viewing a video, the cadence of that video can have a huge impact on you. Those kind of really multimodal temporal perception, AIs are not very good at it yet. And in my own commercial interest, I hope that one day it will become good enough that allows us to provide simulation of those very nuanced things as well. But privately, I'm like, hey, it means that there's a lot of creativity that a human can exercise. These multimodal things are how we can really leave a really human mark on our messages, on our creations. And I'm almost a little bit glad that we are not able to capture all of it just yet, because then from me myself as a writer and creative, I'm like, okay, I still have some
Hmm.
things on my hands that our system can't take away from me just yet. And the only thing it can do now is to help me test out the different ideas so that it can help me create my own creation rather than replacing all of it away from me.
It's a it's interesting. It's a perfect segue to my next segment, which was future predictions. And so I'll start with this one. When do you think, or do you think ever, we will get to a place where AI is that good that it also gets all of those details of those multimodals and temporal things where it understands everything? We could record this podcast, give it to artificial societies, and right away it would tell us this is what's good, this is what's bad, this is how you can improve it, including the rhythm of how we speak and the visuals and everything. Do you think we get there soon?
It's a data problem. I'm not the most familiar with how much data is available on those kind of signals. I think it's not a technical problem, it is a data quality
Mm.
problem. And there's a lot of really smart people working on
Yeah.
it.
And there's a lot
So,
of
because
data
of
on
that, I
YouTube
think it's
for
solvable.
Google to train on, for example. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, so it is doable. And I think we don't actually need to be all the way there for the technology to be useful. Like right now, you can use an LLM to label certain cadences within our conversation and pick out and reason upon that to say, let's say, which part of this should we stitch together into a smaller segment, which part of it should we remove because it's too boring, James is rambling, which part of
None.
it should we
You're
highlight a
never
lot
you're
more?
never boring.
Thank you. So I think the technology can be useful before it's perfect.
Yeah,
And
interesting.
that's another thing that we try to really remember at artificial societies. this is a really fun concept that we are working on, which means there's a lot of danger of just getting off track and doing some really fun research. And we always try to remind ourselves that the reason why we are here is to make a product that people want, make a product that some people can make some use out of. So everything should be around, is it useful? And sometimes perfection is an enemy to
Yeah.
usefulness. So we try to build a useful product rather than just like trying to be 100% perfect on the simulation itself.
Wow. Very cool. Okay. Um, I have three more questions and not a lot of time, so I'm trying to do all of them now. Uh, what's a future product that you wish or dream that someone would build on top of your platform?
Oh, if someone can connect artificial societies with lovable, then that would be quite something.
Wow.
Imagine being able to simulate an app in an artificial societies to see if it will be popular and then just execute it on lovable. Then that is the last piece of
There
business.
you have it. That's the next for the next YC batch. I think applications are
For the
open.
next YC
Go
batch.
to YC. Go
Yes,
ask Jared. Jared
yes,
was your partner. So go ask Jared and say, hey,
yes,
we're first go get a deal with artificial societies and with Lovable. And
yes,
then you go see Jared or
yes,
YC. And okay, awesome. Thank you for that. That's really cool. I would love
yes.
that. How far are we, in your opinion, to simulate an entire society, maybe an entire country like the US, for example?
I think we are a fair distance away, mostly because the science of understanding how people influence each other at a really large scale is still yet to be fully ironed out. We know how two individuals interact with each other. We've been able to model that in like a society of maybe 100 to 1,000 individuals. And then on a very macro scale, we can sort of model how two cultures might interact with each other. But how do you create, for example, artificial society of 350 million individuals and be able to capture all the patterns from all the very local level
Yeah.
changes to the national level, to the internet, to the weather and transport and all of that? I think there is a lot of science yet to be discovered. I'm not saying that it is impossible to create a useful product out of it. I'm saying that if we want to really fully simulate all of that, I think there is a distance away. And part of me is hoping that there will always be a small discrepancy, because if we are able to fully simulate a large scale society like the United States, then do we have free will?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And I hope we do.
That's
I hope we do.
that's a very good place to end it. Everyone can try at societies.io. And where can listeners follow you if they want to stay in touch? What's the best place to find you?
I think LinkedIn is the best place. I'm James He on LinkedIn. So find me James He Artificial Societies YCW25, and you should be able to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. I had a blast. That was really awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Likewise,
Awesome.
really enjoyed
Thank
that.
you. And to our listeners, if you're still here, please hit the subscribe button. What are you doing not subscribed yet? And the notification bell on YouTube. If you're on your favorite podcast platform, you can leave us a 5-star review. I also have a solo channel where I publish solo videos on VC and YC. You can find it by typing Gabriel Jarrison in the YouTube search bar. I'll see you next week for a next episode. Bye, everyone.